Hello, everyone, and this is sig-aws. Please make sure that you fill in the attending on the meeting document that we have here. Please write your name there. And we have a few agenda items that I added, so please add your own if you want to be able to discuss it. So I wanted to make sure we have something to discuss, especially some things from last week. I want to make sure that we continue following them. And one of the things that we have is to make cluster ID required. I don't know if we got any action items from last week, but I wanted to make sure that we bring that to a finish or to a close. So what's the status on cluster ID required?
I did think I saw a PR. Let me see if there is actually a PR, and if so, I'll link it in there.
Perfect. Excellent. So we'll wait for the end to come back. Oh, sorry. Okay. I was saying something. Also, we have. All right. So what's the status of the PR?
It looks like it's just an issue, but Rob said he was working on it, or is working on it.
Oh, is he online? I don't see him online right now. I see him on other meetings. Him and I on the other ones, like Azure and OpenStack. I'll find them there. Okay. So the next item that we have is the nodes going away when on their status when they are stopped. So we have a PR from Hetio, right? Is Ken online? No, he's not. But I have a little bit of an update for this one. I brought this up at the SIG Azure meeting, and they were very excited about knowing about it. They didn't know about it, about the PR. So now they're included in that. I've been providing feedback. Does anybody have any other feedback or status for stop nodes and then going away?
Presumably that isn't something we can just do in AWS. We have to do that in a more, broader way. So that's going to be tricky.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up in a SIG Azure, and I think one of the guys, I think in the PR said that they want to do it the way GCE does it. But it's still up in the air. This is something that I've been trying to work with others in other SIGs, other cloud SIGs. All right, so the last one, unless anybody has any other comments on that, we can continue on. Everybody seems pretty shell-shocked this morning. All right, so the next one that I have here is the friendly ELB name. As you guys know now, we use the UID for the ELB name, and we kind of hash it, take out the dashes and stuff like that, and then trim it to 32 characters. So we wanted to see if we can discuss a little bit about what we can do about making ELB names a little more friendly. And I put a little blurb up there on the possibility of a template, but I wanted to get your opinion on that. So
I can jump in and give an update to everyone on this has been a long-standing issue.
Yeah.
The name of the ELB itself is not ideal. We do add a tag as of a couple of versions ago. So there is a tag which has the friendly name. The sort of three challenges that always come up on any proposal are the fact that you have to be careful, or you have to think about what you do if there's a collision between two ELBs with the same name somehow. The UID gets around that. The ELB name has a limited length, I think 32 characters, so I don't recall exactly, and a limited set of characters that are allowed, and annoying things like you can't start with a number, which was okay, that's great. And then whatever PR goes in has to be able to cope with the existing
That's right.
ELBs. Those are the sort of, so I am in favor of this, but there's yet to be a PR that, well, I haven't looked in detail this one, but there's yet to be a PR that has not fallen foul of one of those requirements or one of those challenges, I guess.
Well, those are very good challenges
Yeah.
to keep track of, all right? To make sure you're satisfied. I think a good unit test will be able to test those too. But right now, the just a little blurb that I added to the end of that was just to have a template, almost standardized model that you can always search for your Kubernetes ELBs, and then have your service name and namespace used to be able to find them, and then have a chunk of the UID to be able to differentiate it for other ones that have the same namespace and UID if you're running multiple Kubernetes clusters in the same account. So if you guys want, I'll put it. I think
I don't know if is that Joe? I don't know if you're actually talking or.
Sorry, I was switching.
Okay.
Okay. No problem. So if you want, I could put a PR up there to try to make sure that the PR deals with those issues, and we can discuss it there, or.
I mean, I think so. I think the clever bit of your suggestion is the bit which gets around a lot of the problems is that you use a large portion or a portion of the UID.
Yeah.
And so we use enough that you would argue that it is unlikely to collide, and I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
And then there's enough of the namespace and name. You put in the first 8 characters that you give people an idea. I think that's a nice compromise, and it gets around the conflict. Like, we can argue that in practice it is never going to conflict. So yeah, as long as if you have an idea about how to adopt existing ELBs, then I think
to make sure you still deal with the ones that are there for backward compatibility.
Yes, and you don't want to change their name because people will have CNAMEs to it.
Okay, gotcha. Absolutely.
There is a tag, right? So there is a tag which we add, so there is the opportunity to use that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a privacy concern here. If what you name your service internally, if that leaks out via the CNAME that actually shows up in DNS, it might be something that we don't want.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Absolutely.
I mean,
maybe, you could use an annotation in that case to like. I do like the idea of having ELB names actually be sensible, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't. I mean, this also happens with CloudFormation templates, right? Like the ELB names in a CloudFormation template are based on the name of the template, and so that actually is an information leakage out too, in some ways, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. Is it possible maybe to then have maybe an annotation on the service that says this is the name I want for the ELB, and then we'll add that UID to the end too to make sure.
I think
something like ELB base name or something like that.
Yeah.
And that gives folks a way to essentially, if they do hit this issue, there's a way out.
Yeah.
I like that, as long as we include the enough of the UUID, and we can argue like in circles about that. But
we can say that it's 16 characters. That's a lot for an ELB name that for a service in annotation, and then the next 16 is the UID, right?
We could go around and say, that seems like plenty to me, but I haven't done the math, but it seems like plenty. Yeah.
What do you guys think? I like the annotation model better than just ripping out the service name, because they may not want that. They may say, hey, wait a second, that's not the name I want outside, right? That's a good point. Thank you.
I just think we need documentation on what all the annotations are.
I was just thinking that I just picked up on the sig-aws channel. Somebody pointed to someone on, it's like, look at the code line here. And
I did that to somebody the other day. I'm like, this is the best we got right now. And we got to,
You know what? I'm going to take an action item to document
that. The code does have the advantage that, yes, I agree. But like the code does have the advantage that it is a block at the top and it's reasonably easy to read. And the comment is right there. And like,
I don't want to send people to a Go line. So
it is a bit like the Erlang joke, right? So
Yeah. All right. I'll make sure. I'm going to start that work to document the annotations and put them in some type of document. And then I'll also create a PR that uses an annotation to create an ELB name if that's what you want. If not, you go back to the old model and everybody's happy, right?
and I guess the only, I'd like that. I think the only open question is if I add the annotation,
Mm-hmm.
there is an argument that if I add the annotation, I should actually delete the old ELB. I don't. It's more code, and I don't know what we would want to do there. But I mean, like,
I'll create my ELB.
Well, I would delete it. You can't rename it. You can't rename it at the AWS level. So
you have to delete it, and you have to create a new one.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, the user's has done something, right? They have affirmatively created the name.
Yeah.
So there was a new user inside of Heptio, and they were really scared as they were sort of tweaking their service that it was going to accidentally recreate or sort of muck with the LB and actually cause downtime. So, like,
yeah, but then I create the annotation, and then it isn't there because I was too slow, right?
Well, I mean, like, you can do the annotation as you create the thing, and then once the name is set, you know, it's set, and we just document that. I mean, there's not a great place to surface warnings to actually let people know, hey, like, you know, we didn't do this, right? I mean,
well, we can do events, which would show up in kubectl describe service.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's not a bad idea.
So we can say that if the service has already been created, you cannot change its name. So if you wanted to set a name, it has to be done at creation time.
Yeah.
And we would.
Well,
and then
go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say then the logic would be first we would look for the UUID, and then we would look for an annotation. And when we create, we would create in the other order. If the annotation, if it's present, we use that. If not, we fall back to the UUID.
Absolutely. Yep.
I mean, there's probably this is stuff that could be documented as part of sort of what these annotation means. Because if you mark a service as being an internal service and then you change that annotation, what do we do now? Do we recreate?
Oh, that's a good point.
I don't know. That is the complicated one.
Well, you know,
everything else I think we can change. I don't know.
So because recreating that ELB is scary because that causes downtime. And, you know, and there's like, it takes a while for a new ELB to spin up and you have to remap DNS. I mean, that is the
DNS name is like, we're very,
well, everything's coming back up.
We are sort of paranoid not to change the service, delete the service ever. Mm-hmm. Even if you create one with the same name, it has a different suffix. So we are paranoid about that.
So if we do end up using events, I think the issue here is that this isn't really an event, it's a condition. And there is some sort of rethinking of events in terms of like, how do we actually stop some sort of event spam when there's actually sort of a condition that's ongoing, right? Because essentially what you want to say is, hey, there's a condition that we have a misconfiguration in the service, something that you should be aware of. And then if they correct that service, that condition goes away, right?
Yes, it would only
have an idea of generic conditions for objects.
If we logged it from within the AWS Cloud Provider load balancer update function, it would only get logged when a node was added or removed, or like it would only get logged sort of rarely-ish, you know, like it wouldn't be logged.
Is that events roll off, right? So if you did this,
right, you have like an hour.
And then like, you know, a day later you actually describe, the thing won't show up. So it's this idea of like, how do we actually have a persistent condition that we attach to an object without spamming the event? Because you could say, well, we'll just log it every 15 minutes, right? And it's like, well,
sounds like that's a larger issue. I mean,
I mean, there is some talk. Let me dig up the sort of like, God help us, the thing. I think the doc is called "Make Events Great Again."
We did that.
I know, right?
I just want to make sure we come back to the root of the point, because we know if we're going to go into this rat hole.
I think it was Merrick that did it. Leave it to a non-American to actually make that joke.
feel like the proposal that Luis made is sound in that use the annotation, put some bytes of the UID in there to ensure no collisions. There is a procedure for avoiding collisions and for adopting existing ones. We could log an event. There are issues with just logging an event, but those apply across the system, and I think people are. There is you do have a window where you notice your ELB has a funky name or doesn't have the name you expect, and you go and you kubectl describe service, and it will tell you. It would be nice if that window was longer. I agree.
And only on creation, right?
Oh. You could log it. If you wanted to, you could log it whenever you wanted to.
Not the login part. Sorry, let me start over. Only allow the changing or the creation of the name on creation of the ELB, not after the fact. So if somebody changes the annotation on an existing service, it'll just be logged or evented or something.
I think that makes sense. Okay. There is an argument both ways, but I think it makes more sense and it's safer. So.
Sure. So we should also investigate what happens to an external ELB when you change it to internal.
Yeah, I'm just searching the code.
I'm going to put that here as a question.
There's a to-do, sync internal versus non-internal. But the answer is that we ignore it. We do the same thing. We ignore it today. We only look at that flag on create, although we also then pick the subnets appropriately. So it's probably a bad idea to change it. I don't know if there's a way we could block that. I guess there is, but we would presumably have to do that in admission controller or, yeah.
What's this doc on the chat?
Oh, that's the event stuff. There's this idea of marking events of sort of event series, state ongoing and finished, and so that you can collapse these things and you can sort of like periodically report a state, an error state, and then be able to see that. So this comes up a lot when, like, let's say you're trying to deploy a pod and it's having a problem pulling an image, right? It'll keep trying to pull that image over time. It's an error back off type of thing, right? It's a similar type of thing, right? There's some sort of long-term thing that somebody has to make some change to fix or something else has to sort of come together. So I'm thinking that the wheels are turning here. Is that is there a need for a generic sort of peer to event, which is sort of like object conditions that, are ways to surface configuration errors and warnings that users might want to know about that can't be caught at admission time. Or we don't want to, we could do this with an admission controller that says, hey, you're changing this, don't change it. But once you start, that's expanding scope pretty dramatically to actually start doing an admission controller as part of this.
Sure.
I can see the wheels fit. Like Justin's like, ooh, I get to write an admission controller.
I've written admission controllers and I get yelled at for writing. Like putting the cloud provider in an admission controller does not make me it does not make me a popular person.
but like there's a reason here, right? But like I can see the wheels turning here, man.
This would be less bad because we would not have to actually call out to the cloud provider to tell whether the annotation had changed. But like the admission controller currently tags volumes with their zones, and that is very unpopular because it makes an AWS API call inside an AWS.
Oh, is there already an AWS admission controller?
The volume one tags when you create, and it has not made me popular because then we have in our API calls we have suddenly a call out to an external API which could take some unbounded amount of time.
Yeah, gotcha.
Or a fail or retry or what have you. Yeah. Good times.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that gets fixed by initializers is the long-term plan. So. Okay. But I feel like we don't need to. We can do a warning or something, and if it turns out that everyone is really perplexed, we can do an admission controller. But
I think right now we can just do what we're doing with everything else.
Okay, so here's another idea here is that we could have the cloud provider write back to the object essentially with a new annotation, which is like, AWS conditions or something like that.
So place something in the object itself that can be looked at by the user.
Right. I mean, like, here's the thing. What we really want to do is essentially subclass the service so that we can actually add a bunch of sort of strongly typed fields to it. We don't have the mechanisms to do that because like web APIs, right? But so much, everything that we've been doing so far is really about the spec side of it, enhancing the spec with some domain specific things. This would be enhancing status with something that's domain specific. And so there may be people that barf at this, but I'm just throwing the idea out there.
You're talking about the status in the object itself, not in the spec.
Well, so logically, the annotations that we have now are extending the spec part of the service object, right? They're in an annotation, but like from the user's point of view, this would logically slot into the spec if we had a way to extend spec in a domain-specific way.
I see.
Right? To be able to reflect these error conditions or these warnings, that's logically belongs in the status. And so the contract roughly is that the user writes spec, the systems write status. We can't do that because this is all domain specific to AWS. And so perhaps the way to do it is that there's a set of annotations that the user writes that are, spec annotations, and then there's an annotation or two that the system writes, which are status annotations.
And the status would be that we were unable to. It feels to me like the status would be more like an event, is sort of where I'm.
Well, no. I mean, it's a condition, right? The status is
but I mean,
unable to like
There's no APIs to do that
unable
today?
to reconcile, blah blah blah, right?
There's no APIs for the AWS code to be able to set a status, or if we return a status back to the caller, to the controller.
Yeah. This is some plumbing. This is going to be invasive.
Yeah.
I mean,
maybe, I think
I would like to get more. This has come a bunch of times, which is like, how do we get the cloud providers to be able to access the API? Like, they don't actually have a API client, and it proves to be really annoying. And so one of the changes that was made, I think, for OpenStack was that they pushed down the node objects themselves rather than the node names into the ensure load balancer function of the cloud provider, which actually is really handy because, for example, on AWS, it means we don't have to like map the names to the AWS instance IDs because they are right there in the node object.
Oh,
So
I see. Yeah. Okay, that gets rid of all the sort of like reverse DNS BS type crap, right?
Yes, there were two. So there are two. Yes, there are two things where that arises. One of which is that the master needed to be able to resolve the name to the node. That's gone away if you change the reconciliation, the resolver order. The other one, which remains a problem, is the cloud provider API is primarily defined in terms of node names, and AWS is defined in terms of instance IDs, and it's hard to do that mapping. We have a caching layer now, but the real gotcha is if you are in a small subnet, your node name will be reused. Because your node name is like IP-172.20-1.2. And if you're in a small enough subnet, if you're in a 24, it's going to get reused pretty quick.
Yeah. And then hilarity ensues.
Yeah, hilarious. So that's the gotcha. And yeah, so it would be if we could watch the nodes, for example, we could presumably like know when it was a new node, or we could use the UUID. And I think we should use the node ID rather than the node name, or we should just get the node object. But that there's a lot of long-term like SIG cloud type discussions to happen there, I think. It would be nice to just plumb the Go client into the cloud provider. I think that came up. I think VMware was asking for that.
Yeah. So Luis,
yeah,
you mentioned earlier that Ken had a change in about sort of changing the behavior when nodes are removed.
There's a PR that is an extension of the overall PR for all cloud providers to have the same behavior when a stopped instance.
Yeah, no, I don't think that was Ken that was involved in that. We should dig that up. Is that in the?
It's on the agenda. It's the first one.
Okay, I'll dig it up. I just checked with him offline, and he's like, no, that's not me. So I'm trying to.
Ken Simon.
Yeah. Did he? I'll dig it up, and I'll close the loop there. Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
All right, don't wait on me.
Write it and use his account to.
Oh, I see. He created an issue. I don't think there was no PR on it. Okay.
Oh yeah. It's created an issue with an extension. Sorry, I didn't. To me, they're both the same. Sorry.
Let's be clear. It's easy to file an issue.
Yeah.
It's a lot more work to actually submit a PR.
Yeah. Exactly right. Okay.
Just putting a note in there that if anyone's looking for something to submit, like, wanting to get their teeth into Kubernetes, I saw that there's a PR in progress for KMS, for GCE KMS support for the etcd encryption layer. And that would be a logical one once that series merges to add the AWS equivalent. And so I will dig up the link for that PR. Obviously, I was thinking about doing it, but it is also a nice way to get into Kubernetes if someone is looking for it.
Yeah, a nice way to participate too. All right. Any other items that we want to talk about?
Okay. So the Heptio Quick Start, we have a change that's gonna go through soon to update our Quick Start to 1.7.2. Just sort of heads up there. Here's the pull request there if folks want to look at that.
I don't know if anyone's using has anyone looked at the Cloud Controller Manager yet? Has anyone actually tried that? I don't know what I, to my shame, have not actually tried it. The sort of pulling out of the cloud provider from Kube Controller Manager.
No. Could you add that to the agenda? I'll take a look at that.
Will do. But yeah, I worry that's going to land on us at some time, and I just I know I haven't tested it, so I just if anyone else is
No, I haven't even looked at it. Quick Start. Okay. I'll check this out too.
This is our sort of bare bones, no frills, get up and running quickly experience.
Okay. I'll check that out too. Anything else? All right, guys. Thank you very much. And I'll see you guys all in 2 weeks.
See you later.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.